Hey everybody, it's Angel from Halo Inspirations. We give you inspirations to help you spread beauty and joy through your quilting journey. Today is week 4, our final week of a summer quilting tale. And just like in the title, this week's video is all about suggestions and some techniques on quilting. And then afterwards, just get it bound and celebrate that you have finished your bookshelf quilt for this summer. So, speaking of quilting, that means we gotta pick a design, right? Well, I wanted to do something that gave a little bit of variety, and these are just suggestions, and even if you don't use mine, maybe it will get your mind churning in your own direction, right? And that's what this is about. I am going to show you a little bit of techniques, but I'm definitely here to just try to jumpstart your inspiration. Now, if you are so super new to quilting, you could, because a lot of people do, and advanced quilters do this too for this type of bookshelf. They just do straight lines all the way down from top to bottom. Just straight lines going through it. It looks phenomenal, okay? It is a really good idea. And it's another really good idea because, in my opinion, this quilt, I want this quilt to stand the way it is. I really struggled because I love to quilt things to death. But if you add a lot of quilting, I'm afraid that the quilting will stand out and it'll take away from my bookshelf. So the straight lines, you could use your, depending on how large your quilt is, you could use, though, if it gets too big, you could use your walking foot, very simply doing straight lines. I'm going to be doing straight lines in here, and I'm going to be using some painter's tape for some guidance, and I'll explain that later. But it would be very feasible and very easy to do. I've actually seen it, I think it would look better going vertical, but I have seen people do horizontal too. So it's up to whatever you would want to do, but it is something very feasible that all of us at every level can do. Now, because I was speaking about the idea that I didn't want too much quilting to take away from the bookshelf quilt, the actual quilt, a good all over motif works well with this. So if you're a beginner free motion quilter, you could do a meander inside this quilt, all over meander, and it would look on point. It would look great because it's just enough to hold the quilt together, give it just a little bit of stuff, and allow your quilt to do the showcase, be the center of your eye, right? So that's a really good idea. And I got to thinking about the meander. And if you wanted to, let's say you were themed, let's say you were patriotic themed, right? You could do a meander with some stars. If it was a Christmas themed bookshelf quilt, you could do a meander with pops of holly leaves, right? I was listening to Vicki's podcast, and she does call it her pandemic bookshelf quilt. And there are things that she added elements into her quilt. Well, if she did an all over type motif, she could put other types of things that didn't make it in, right? Like maybe, or even things that did, like she could do like a little cell phone just somewhere, right? You know, just little pops of different items within your meander. So that was one idea that came that might look really, really cool. If you're a little more advanced, I was thinking, I don't know what this motif is called, and I'm going to bring you in closer to my table to show you what I'm talking about. But it's like a little starburst thing, and it goes in the corners, and then and they're straight lines, okay? And in between, you could have your feathers, right? In between your starburst, or you could even do feathers in between and give yourself more structure, more straight line, right? Because one of the things they say is when you have a lot of straight lines in your quilt, it's nice to break it up with something that flows. So in this situation, I'm doing some straight lines because I want the quilt to stand on its own. But I completely understand where they're coming from, and that would give you the ability to really flow in, right? So that was another idea that I had. Now, if you are really experienced at writing words in your free motion quilting, instead of doing lines inside of your background, and if you're like me, I can write words, but they don't always look great. So I would use the same color thread doing this, what I'm about to tell you, same color thread inside my background to help hide some of the oopsies, right? But you could write author names, okay? You could do book titles. You could do quotes that you might find in some of the books or in some of your favorite books. And you could use that inside of your background as an idea, as an inspiration, okay? That would look really cool. And you could just simply separate your background from your books by doing a simple echo, right? And then, you know, fill in some stitching of sort. Either you could, again, free motion quilt book titles. I don't think I have I'm not going to lie to you, I don't think I have the courage to do that. But you could just very simply do echoes inside your books, right? Just around the edges. Or, you know, a couple of straight lines. Since you did the words in here, you could just do some straight lines in your books to help that. Or do what I'm doing and stitch them in a ditch so they pop, okay? So those were some of the ideas that I came up with. So what am I going to do? Well, I am going to actually do straight line quilting in the background, a stitch in the ditch my books because I want those books to pop. And in the borders and the sashing, I don't know what I'm terrible when it comes to motif names. It's kind of like a wavy line. It has some triangle elements or some chevron-like thing. I have to show it to you, which is one of the techniques I'm going to show in this video is how to do that particular motif. But I'm going to do it in the borders and the sashing, okay? Now, when you go to quilt, no matter if you're on, well, it does matter actually. If you're quilting on your domestic, you do want to start you want to take your quilt and build it into 4 quadrants, okay? And you want to start in the center and work your way out, okay? And if you had a typical quilt, you could, you know, or meander, you would start in the center and you'd work one quadrant, you come back, work the other quadrant, you'd come back, work the other quadrant, and then come back to the middle and finish it off. Why do we do things like that? Because if you have any fullness inside of your quilt, okay, or if you have any material that is kind of, you know, a little extra going on, and even when you quilt, even if you think you don't, it tends to push the fabric. So it helps if you're pushing it from the center out and from the center out, you're going to help prevent puckers or folds, okay? Because that fabric is going to be pushed out from the middle to the sides where there is no more fabric, okay? So that's the other reason why you don't want friendly borders to begin with, because by the time you push all that fabric out, you may have some serious waves going on with your borders by that point, okay? Just a little can be managed, but whew, it gets a lot. That's why we talked like we did yesterday. So because of the way this quilt is structured, and I am doing this on my domestic, I'm actually going to start in the middle of the middle row. And I'm going to stitch in the ditch my books, come back to the center, stitch in the ditch to the end of the shelf. Then I'm going to take my straight line quilting, and I'm going to use for this center here, I'm actually going to use these seams to guide me to do my straight line quilting. Now my seams don't line up, so I'm going to show you what I do with some painter's tape to get some more lines. So it looks like the lines will all flow and just be interrupted by books and sashing. and it'll restart. This line here will restart and finish off top and bottom. Okay, so I will show that technique when I get there. So inside here though is that motif, that wavy lines, triangles, I don't know what it is. So I will show you how to do that with free motion quilting, and I love it because it's not hard. So, and it does a really cool effect. So I'm really loving that idea. So that's my plan. Put together some ideas. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you in to show you how I chose my thread for what I was going to use to quilt. And then after that, I'm going to show you those more advanced feather ideas and the starburst that I was thinking. And then a technique that I use on my quilts just to audition. Just like we audition fabric, I audition motifs sometimes. Plus I like to see what kind of a scale I need. So I'm going to show you that, and then we'll go from there. But let's have fun, guys. Let's get this quilted, whether you're doing simple straight lines from vertical top to bottom, or you're adding a little more, whether it's your meander all over or another one, or you're doing something a little more advanced. No matter what it is, this is the week that we get to do it. And I want to say that Vicki was thinking. Now, you know, we all get to thinking, and then if you just let this sit a little bit, sometimes other ideas will come to you. But her original thought might have been, yes, our queen of swirls was thinking of doing our swirls in the sashing and borders, and then some straight line quilting, if I remember, in her background, and some other stitches, something in here within her bookshelf. She doesn't have the whole thing solidified yet. Well, at least from the time that I did this video, right? So it'll be fun to watch the Queen of Swirls and what she ends up doing. And I do believe then she is putting it on her long arm. So I'm doing this by domestic and she's doing it by long arm. So she may even have a few more ideas that I can't wait to see inside her group. So let's go ahead and get this started, guys. Let's get quilting. I just wanted to take a second and go over a couple of pictures here. Give us some inspiration. This is Sue, and that cute little cat on that hammock and all those beautiful flowers. She said that this isn't her pattern, and she had it finished and nowhere to put it, and she thought, I'll just put some books on it. And check out all the little things she's got on it, and her little embroidery, and all the beautiful colors. She's just getting started, and this is awesome. Thank you, Sue. Vicki, she has her quilt top finished. Whoop, whoop. She got it done this past week. And I got to tell you, I'm not a real person that likes a lot of yellow, but this I loved. And it just might be because of the contrast with the white and all the colors inside her quilt. I love this. It's like sunshine all day long. I can't wait to see what you do with it, Vicki. The first time I brought you in close, I wanted to show you how it is that I choose thread. Now I've already chosen it, and I gotta tell you, I was surprised by my choice. I got, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different threads here. 4 of them are light colored because I tend to quilt light, okay? So I did bring in 4 light colors and 1 dark because I was just kind of curious because of the black background. So the first one here is Aurifil's Dove color. It's like a light gray, number 2600, 50 weight. And it's the one I use the most out of all of my threads. I use it the most to piece, and I use it actually a lot to quilt. So I basically take a nice strand and I just lay it out across all the different fabrics. Okay, to include this black. I want to be able to see it against this black, okay? The next one I have here is Aurifil 2310. It's a light beige. And it's the second most popular that I quilt with. And I simply lay it across and take a peek. Now, I can already tell that if I were to choose one of these two, it would have probably been the light gray or dove color. it's a hard one. This is very, very hard, but you also want to look at how it functions with the other colors. And this one I actually contemplated because the dots inside of my border and sashing are really close. So that might have been even a better choice with that. The next color here, as curiosity always, you know, gets me, I laid out this, it's Orphil's 2710, and good thing I didn't choose it because I need to fix this spool. But it's called light, it's a light blue, it's robin egg light blue or light robin egg blue. And so I just simply, again, laid out a nice strand. And I don't just hold, if you notice, I'm not just holding the spool because the color looks different when it's just a single strand. And I gotta tell you, I didn't like this because I didn't like how it was looking across other colors. It just did not, it didn't work for me. And to have blue in the black, I know I have a lot of blue in the quilt, but it just did not speak to me at all. The last, no, then out of curiosity, before I picked this one, because this is actually what I chose, and I was really surprised, but out of curiosity, I don't have a dark colored Orphil. I have a dark blue here though, and I was just curious because this is black. I wanted to know how this would, more so because you can't hardly see it inside the black, which is kind of cool if you don't want it to show. But then I thought, what happens when I quilt with it and inside other colors to include your white, right? I did not like that. Now I'm stitching in a ditch for my books, but if I get off canter and off the line a little bit, what'll happen is it will really show. And if I was going to do straight line quilting all the way through, the blues wouldn't be too bad, but then when I hit the white or this yellow, I did not care for that at all. It wasn't something I was interested in seeing that much of it. So that was a big no-go for me. And usually speaking, they say that if you're going to quilt on dark fabric, you want to use, well, if you're going to quilt and you have darks and lights, it's always more preferred that you quilt light on dark fabric instead of dark thread on light fabric. And I had to see, because sometimes you're going to want to, and you may choose to. I'm just showing you my process. So here's, this really surprised me. This is Orphil's 2510, and it is a light lilac. I was so shocked. I did not think I was going to like it, but I loved how it turned out on the black. And then just depending on where it is inside these other colors, it seems to take on a different, it seems to take the fabric color in quite well. Even when with the yellow, okay, and within the blues, within the whites, within this brown, it just kind of takes on whatever it's surrounding. And I really, really like this. So I ended up choosing this light lilac color. And like I said, I even really like it inside of the black. So this is how I actually choose my fabric when, my thread when I'm going to go quilt. I take different colors and I lay them all out, and I like to see how they work against different colors within the quilt. And I think, no, I know I'm going to do this light lilac, but if I was going to pick something else, I'm now thinking I would have done the light beige color. Oh, it's hard because it's between these two. I really like how this came out on the black better than this, I think, but this isn't bad. And I like how they each work with the other colors. Oh, that would have been a hard choice, but it made it really easy when I found this fifth color. And like I said, I was so pleasantly surprised. So at this point, I'm going to rearrange my camera and I'm going to bring you in and talk about some other quilting ideas. Like I said, I am going to stitch in the ditch, and on my books because I wanted them to pop. I'm going to do some straight lines. I'm going to do some free motion quilting inside my stashing that'll match my borders. So when I go to do some of this, I'm going to show you how I maneuver my quilt, but I'm not going to bring you in close to the quilting, and there's reasons why, and I'll talk about them later inside of the video, but I do want you to see eventually how I wrestle this quilt inside my 7-inch throat. So I will show you that, and I will show you on a practice sandwich the pattern that I'm using inside the stashing and inside my borders. But for right now, I'm going to go off camera, rearrange my camera here so that I'm going to give you some other ideas that you could do with your quilt, especially since if you are, not since, but if you are a more experienced free motion quilter. I had some other ideas. I just try to keep this more simple for those of you that are definitely a beginner, because I think that that is important to add that value. And even if you are more experienced free motion quilter, you can still choose to do something very simple. And straight line quilting is very simple. So I will get this middle section done, and eventually I'll show you some more. Okay, I brought you in a little closer with a few of my ideas. So the first one I thought of, I don't know what shape this is. It's kind of like a half sunburst kind of thing. And and as you can see, I'm not the best at drawing straight lines as much as I'm not the best at quilting them. And I would use a ruler until I got the echo. Okay, so basically it just kind of highlights your corner here. And I think this would not be at all hard to do. I find this a very not difficult type of stitching, but it will just accentuate your corner. And then along the sides here, I would possibly use a feather, so it would it would be a little less stiff and straight lined, to have your feathers going maybe down the sides. And of course you could echo in here. You could do some serpentines in between your corners and your feathers, or some tiny meandering. But I just thought, how pretty it would be to have your feathers going down. And of course I had to add the little swirls, because we know the Queen of Swirls would appreciate that. And so I thought this would make just a beautiful border, absolutely gorgeous border. And I wanted to share for those of you that are a little more experienced in your free motion quilting. This is a one option. Another option I thought of, and yeah, I did use, what are these things called? Paper protectors that you put in your book, and I'll show you why here in a second. But you could also do a feather on your corner, right? And really be able to utilize this corner. And you could make it a little bigger if you want, or you could go ahead and echo this out to make it a little bigger. And then you could do some maybe wood graining after that. I was actually thinking of doing like a kind of a couple of triangles or an X with some, make them big of course, but then with some echoing with them. I think that would separate and allow some straight lines versus some more flow. I love this idea of utilizing these feathers inside. Now my husband, I couldn't even think to draw, but he was thinking of even using the borders as like a frame, like an honest to goodness frame. So, just, stitching out a straight line, doing some bumps. Now this was supposed to be dental teeth. I'd really have to see a picture, but I think it's more like separated, right? And allowing it to be more like a frame. Right, so that's where the other stitch came from, and then maybe a wide zigzag, because you can find those in frames, but really quilting this out like a frame. And I thought that was pretty smart, and I wanted to share that. Now, I love this. If you want to try out different motifs and seeing how well you could draw it out and the right proportion, using these as a cheap resource is a so-go, because you can just draw and, you know, erase and draw again and just really have a lot of fun with your creativity on top of your quilt before you quilted it. So this is just a suggestion, but yeah, I mean, feathers will complement the straight lines. Swirls, of course, will complement the straight lines, because a lot of times they say, like I said before, when you have a lot of straight lines, to break that up, your quilting can add something more that is flowing. Now, you don't always have to do that. You really don't. But I just wanted to give a few more examples to those of you who free motion quilt, what these feathers can do inside your borders or along your corners. I mean, how so pretty is this? It's just gorgeous, right? So I will rearrange my camera again, and I will see you all in just a bit. Okay, I wanted to pull you here for just a minute. I know you're on the back side of my sewing table, and that's okay. I took a picture so you could see my little workstation. It truly is a tiny workstation. And yes, I do have it rolled here. It won't last, okay? And I just want to show you that it is fully possible to quilt a larger quilt on a tiny domestic. And this is basically how I like to work with it. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I can tell that it's been a hot minute that I've done a large quilt on a domestic. I usually do it on my long arm. But as time goes on, I'm getting better and better, reacquainting myself, and it's becoming like a momentum for me. So I'm stitching in a ditch right now, and it really, you know, you'd like to try to go where the quilt is going. You have the bulk of it on the outside, and it gets smaller and smaller. But since I'm right in the middle of the quilt, it doesn't really matter, right? I am still working from the middle out. So I have done one way. Now I'm coming back and doing the center towards the outside of the quilt. And I'm getting the stitch in the ditch in the middle here of in the shelf, around the inside the books. So what's really important is that you do give yourself a working space where your hands can flatten your quilt, and you have that ability to do that, number one. Number two, you want to make sure that your bottom doesn't get stuck underneath and you're not aware of it, and you sew it. We've all done it, but it's just something you have to think about. Make sure that when you're scrunching and you're shoving it in this hole or you're rolling it, that you do not in fact get that bottom part, the backing underneath with your batting. It creates a little bit of a nightmare. So I've got it all situated. The other thing I want to mention is that you want the quilt to be, and I've got a tiny table, guys. I do tend to take another table. I want to put it, you know, out here, so as it goes on to another table, but a lot of us don't have that ability. So I just went ahead for this demo. I just have my small sewing table. You want to make sure that your quilt is up on the top of the table and not dragging anywhere, because it will shorten your stitches and you'll be wondering why things aren't flowing. The other thing that I have to be careful about is that my quilt doesn't hit any buttons. Ask me how I know. Either it's the slide bar for your speed, or it could change the placement of your needle or the stitch, or I mean, it can change anything, right, if it hits a button. So just be really familiar with that. So I'm just going to stitch for a little bit. I'm only going to do a little bit because it's been a rainy day, so it's a little dark. I'm afraid if I put too much light like I normally do down here, I'm going to blind you out. So I'm just going to stitch for a little bit. I'm going to come down on a book, and then I'm going to turn the quilt and go up another book, and then turn the quilt one more time and just go along the width of it before I stop this, because I just want you to see how it is that I in fact do maneuver this quilt. Now I can't see real well, so I might end up doing a bad posture here. And you want to try and keep those shoulders down. I tend to sometimes make them go up, and then I have to stop and I have to breathe and I have to relax those shoulders. So you don't want to be struggling and making yourself tense and getting really sore. So let's get started here. I am going to stitch a little bit down. And right now I can honestly tell you, you can see it too, my quilt's moving really well, and that tells me there's no drag, that my quilt is in fact on top of the table. Now I'm just simply turning it. Now when I turned it, if you notice, I got a lot going on over here, right? I don't want it to drag my needle, okay, or my stitches. It will feel terrible, number one. And number two, you'll be pushing on something and creating those smaller stitches. So what I like to try to do is, and I hope that I'm not hitting this microphone too much, but I'm hoping just to show you, I've got it up here, I've got all this quilt going on up on this table, and I've got, just like I showed that picture before, I've got a nice little working area, so I'm able to keep my quilt nice and flat. Oh, and see, something got me. Oh, my slide. See, I told y'all got to watch your speed. You got to watch your buttons. Just, you never know when you're stitching along if in fact you have moved something. And I'm feeling a little drag, so I'm just going to simply pull it in a little. There we go. When my hands reach too far ahead of me and I can feel the drag again, I just simply stop, rearrange a little more, make sure I didn't hit any buttons. My slide speed looks good, I think. And I just simply start again. Does it take longer? Yes, it does. Than doing it on a long arm? Absolutely. But it is fully possible that you can get this quilt quilted on a little tiny domestic machine. And right now I'm doing the stitch in the ditch, so I just have, see, I started to do my shoulders again. I just have my walking foot loaded. I am going to do a little free motion quilting like I talked about before. So eventually I will switch my foot. But in the meantime, it's starting to get down there, so you just stop. And now I've got to keep going straight at this point, so this is a good thing. Making sure no buttons were pushed. My speed looks good. My backing isn't underneath. I've got a nice flat surface. Whoop, got a little bit too fast when I adjusted it. And you're just going to simply keep going. Whoop, I started to do those shoulders again. Did you see that, guys? All right. Just a few more stitches. Oh, now it's moving. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I'm getting to the end of the book, and I'll do one more turn with you guys. There goes my shoulders again. You just really got to pay attention, especially when you're working with such a great big quilt in a little tiny space, because it's something you want to do. You want to just get down in there, but if you just try to keep those shoulders relaxed, your body will appreciate it so much more. And I've got some drag. I think it's because it's on my arm. Just a little bit more here. And I've got one more turn, and I can tell I was off because I need more light, but that's okay. This is all part of it. Now see, I had to turn it. So of course I lifted my presser foot. Now if you're looking at how to stitch in the ditch, I've done a video, so I'll put a link here up above, and it'll show you. Now it was on a smaller quilt than this one, but the concept is still the same. Yeah, I was a little off, but that's okay. It's a memory in the making. There we go. And then once again, I would just simply turn it, pulling it through. I didn't lift the presser foot. There we go. Once I get it lined up, presser foot will go down to help hold it. There we go. And of course, I would simply rearrange this quilt top to be nice and bunched out from underneath my needle plate. No dragging, no buttons were pushed. And once I got it situated, you just start sewing once again. And that, oh, there goes those shoulders again. That is how I do this. This is how I maneuver this quilt. I just keep sewing, stop to adjust when I feel it tugging, stop when I need to make a turn, rearrange. Yes, like like I said, it does take a little longer, but it's fully possible. So I need to get back to doing this. The next time I see you, I think I'm going to show you how I'm connecting my top, my bottom shelf to my top middle shelf on those straight lines. So I'll get back to you here in just a little bit. Let me get through all this stitch in the ditch and some straight line quilting, and I'll come back and show you another technique. Okay, I brought you back to my table because I wanted to show you how I'm getting these straight line in and equal. You don't have to do this, but this is exactly how I'm doing mine. So I am actually doing some free motion quilting in my sashing and in between, so my lines won't connect. I'm not doing straight lines all the way through. I'm breaking up between the books because I'm doing stitch in the ditch, and then I'm doing some straight line quilting in the background. So what I have done is on the place that I have finished, I have put a piece of tape along the line and then to the next book, because this is the stitch I'm going to do. Now, of course, I'm going to start about the middle. So it'll be this line right here. And notice I put the tape all the way down. It starts at the line at the top. I just simply put it over, and I'm going to straight line stitch along this piece of tape. Then I'm going to go to the next one. I've put a piece of tape down, and I'm going to start here, and I'm going to go all the way down to the book. Okay, now I got to do the stitch in the ditch, down here still. And so I will take these off and get that done first, and then I'm going back and doing this straight line stitching. Now I wanted to mention a couple of things. If you're just straight line stitching all the way down your quilt, you could simply use, if you have one, a walking foot with a straight line guide or a quilting bar, okay? And you would just simply do the first line all the way down your quilt, down the middle. You don't have to be exact every time. You can change the thickness of your lines unless you want them all the same. But then on the second run, you would line it up on the line that you quilted in the amount of space you want, and just follow that line with your walking foot and your quilting bar. Start in the middle, work out one way, start in the middle, work out the next way. Very simply just doing straight lines. Now, if you don't have a quilting bar, you could use painter's tape to help with that, but that'd be a long piece of tape. So I would probably use something else inside the quilt, but you could use painter's tape. Now I'm not using it because my the quilting bar because my favorite walking foot does not have a hole for one. So that's where the painter's tape comes into play. Now, the next thing when I come back, I'm going to show you, this is what the motif that I'm using inside of my borders and sashing. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to get this part ready. What I have done here is I drew the space that I have in my border. This is 3 3/4 because I cut it at 4 inches and I sewed part of it on, so I lost a quarter. So I did 3 3/4, 2 very simple chalk lines, just as a reference, just as something to give me some practice, and went ahead and did a couple of practice runs. And you can see, you know, I need that, right? But I'm going to show you how, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and clear out these stitches. This is my basting stitch. I did some thread basting. I'm going to draw 2 more lines, and I'm going to show you how, in fact, to do this motif. This is such a fun motif. It kind of looks like wood, to be honest with you. And so it's not difficult and you don't have to be perfect. So I'm going to pull you in next and I'm going to show you how, and this is not a how to free motion quilt. This is if you free motion quilt already, and just how the direction on how I got this motif done. So I will see you all in just a bit. I got a lot more quilting to do. Okay, you're getting a little sneak peek into my life here. So I haven't done a whole bunch of free motion quilting on my domestic, and I need to practice this a little bit. And I've also started to change how I free motion quilt since the long arm. I used to leave my feed dogs up on my domestic. It worked great, felt like I had a lot of control. But since I've been doing this a while, I just feel like I need to make that change. So my feed dogs are down and I'm going to be practicing a little bit, see how it feels, and make sure my settings are good before I actually attack my quilt border. And as you can see, I have been practicing a little bit. I tried to record, but the camera failed on me. So we're going to, at the same time, I'm going to show you, I don't know the name of this motif, but I'm going to show you how to do it. It's a lot of fun, and if you don't use this on this quilt, maybe you can use it on another one. But as you can see, I have line drawn. This is my border, and I actually have one up here also. That's where my end of my border is. That just kind of gives me a feel for scale and, you know, proportions and different things. So this is on my practice sandwich. I did choose to do it on a practice sandwich because I didn't think you'd see the stitches on my border because of the way the fabric and the thread work. So this is how we're going to do this. And the first thing is you're going to want to start down anywhere on the border. Get your needle ready. And you're going to basically stitch a diagonal line to the other side of the border. When you do this, you want to make it wavy, okay? Try not to pay attention to the stitch, pay attention to where you're going, okay? That's very important. So we're going to go ahead and get this started. Just a simple wavy line. Oh, I'm sorry, hit the camera. Okay. Now at the point up here, you will stitch in the ditch. Don't let it scare you. It's actually easier than stitching along this line. And if you need to take it slow, just take it slow. Now you can see, for the most part, let me see if I can pan out just a little bit here. There we go. You can actually see that I've got myself a triangle. So now what we're going to do is we came in a little bit along that stitch in the ditch, okay? And we're just going to come back to a point and back out to the line. We're just going to do one more round. Do not do an echo. So again, don't pay attention to the wavy line. The wavier and the more consistent, the better. It makes it look really organic. So Just look where you're going, come to the point where you want and go back. And again, you're going to stitch in the ditch. And we're going to come back up and go back down. One more time, I think. We're just basically filling this triangle in. Yeah, I think I can do one more. Maybe not. But then you're going to stitch along the ditch to the point that we started on the end of this triangle. Okay. And then we're basically going to come and we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to come down to this line, making that diagonal, getting it nice and wavy. It really helps if you just look where you're going and not at that line, okay? Then you're just going to simply stitch in the ditch. Okay, and then we're going to go back up. And come back down. We're going to come back over a little again. And go back up. And come back down. Move it on over. And we're going to go back up. Come back down. This time I'm going to skip it. That next little one in there. Just basically stitch in the ditch. Like I said, when you do it, I think it's easier to stitch in a ditch than a straight line. But just take it nice and slow. When you get to that point, we're going to go back up to that border again. Okay, and then there you have it. You have another triangle, and you're just going to keep on filling them in and just keep on moving along your border or along wherever you choose to use this motif, and it just creates this really cool organic look. Here's some of the first ones I did. Let's see if I can pull this in for you. Well, I can flip it around, that's for sure. It just really does some really cool things. And you can just really have a lot of fun with it. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to have fun. And remember, the more organic, the more wavy and less of an echo, the better. So I'm going to get back to practicing the rest of that strip down there, but then I got to get to my borders. So see y'all in a little bit. Okay, guys, I did it. I got it quilted. And I still got to bury threads. I still got to square it and put a binding on it. But I thought I'd show you. And there'll definitely be more pictures in due time once the binding is done and the threads are buried. But I got to tell you, this was super fun. Absolutely fun. So while y'all will be quilting your quilts this week, I will be finishing up the burying of threads, the squaring, and the binding. Yippee. Now I did do this on a 7-inch throat. It can be done. Absolutely can be done. And it's a process that you can really enjoy. Now I wanted to mention we are waiting to see how the Queen of Swirls, Miss Vicki, is going to quilt hers. And if you're in her group, we're all going to be looking forward to seeing it. And if you're interested in seeing hers and other people within her group that you may be interested, or in my group, both of those links will be down below. So you come on over and join the fun. It's never too late to start your quilting summer tale. Never too late. It's always a good time to start a new quilt, right? Just as long as this one, you make it a plan to get it done. Mine should be done. It'll actually probably take me, probably another 3-4 days to get this all finished. I might stretch it to 5. So that puts me a little bit more than 4 weeks, but it can be done, especially if you're doing a smaller wall hanging, or you're using a different method of quilting, because I think I really went out and beyond. It was for a bookshelf quilt, but it didn't take away from it. So that's what I appreciated about doing that type of quilting. I don't feel like I took anything away from the quilt. So that is our summer quilting tale. I want to personally thank Vicki for everything you have done, and for your friendship, and for your guidance, and for your beautiful inspiration of helping us all spread beauty and joy. Really do appreciate it. I also want to mention, as far as Vicki goes, she had a fantabulous podcast come out this week. Well worth your listen. And I'll put that link down below also. So if you're interested in her My Creative Corner 3 podcast, this week would be the week to listen to it. If I remember correctly, the title of it is something like "This show is brought to you by the color yellow." So, and of course we all know that she put that gorgeous yellow on her bookshelf quilt. So I'll put that link down below. I will be on Facebook, and I do believe Vicki will be able to make it, but it'll be 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on my Facebook page. That link will be down below. I'll be there to answer any questions. And I got a couple ideas that started swinging in my head, so I'll add those in at that point too. So looking forward to seeing y'all there. But I gotta get started burying threads, guys, because did you see how many were there? Yeah, and get it bound so that I can celebrate, and I can celebrate with you once you get yours done too. So happy quilting to each and every one of you. And until next time, may y'all continue to be inspired, productive, and joyful, and never stop making your dreams in quilting come true. Love y'all. See y'all later.